law.
You tried to break into the station computer. Why?
And order.
I can't believe what I got myself into.
You have to trust me.
I do trust you.
Passion.
I don't ever want to leave this room.
And secrets.
She's not who she seems to be.
Lies can be deadly.
As soon as we got the crystal, she dies.
But you can't protect me forever.
On the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
It was a hot night on DS9, the kind of night that makes your knees sweat and your neck itch. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Deep Space Noir. We have returned on the depths of DS9. I am your intrepid host, Detective Fist, alongside, well, I guess I can still call you Lieutenant Commander Gell. How are you, sir?
I don't even get to be a constable.
Right, Constable Gell. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a simple investigation. It's a noir episode of DS9. Every so often, you get one of those. It's odd, man. Looking up information about this episode, they didn't even mention noir at all. They did mention that one of the primary inspirations for it was a film noir, although I have my doubts about that being the specific one that they were inspired by, but they mostly focus on the fact that it's a romance.
Yeah.
And it's understandable this is the most serialized Star Trek series, right? So in the broader context of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the most important takeaway here is the romantic aspect because of what happens, 4 or 5 episodes later with this character's romantic life or whatever. But this is a noir episode. And it's funny because Ira Stephen Bear, after this episode came out, he said on many, many occasions, he didn't feel Deep Space Nine did very good romance. Usually the romances wound up being cringe.
Right, like soap opera stuff.
Exactly. And yet he felt like this one worked. And I think, that's a failure to identify why this is working. It kind of concerns me. Because the reason this works is because it's not primarily a romance. It works because it's primarily a murder mystery detective story noir. That's why it's working at the end of the day. But this is a darn good episode. Do you remember much about this one? I mean, this is one that kind of sneaks up on me sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of remembered what happened. I actually forgot the twist at the ending.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That one kind of jumps up on me too. I like the twist.
Yeah, no,
I like the twist a lot, even though it's a little bit of a rehash of what happened with Kira and the Cardassians.
A little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. But, like all good noir, this episode begins with a murder!
Has there been a murder?
What happens, Taryn? We're introduced to random hooded alien.
Yeah, random hooded alien. Whenever an alien wears a hoodie, it's immediately suspicious.
Right,
he's
down
profiling.
Yes, he's down at the store getting Skittles and Sprite.
I mean, I'm sure he was completely innocent of any wrongdoing.
Odo walks in, one of the aliens is kneeling on his neck. Anyway, so, immediately this guy gets vaporized. It leaves, powder burns on the floor, which I like that effect.
I mean, you always have to wonder. I've always wondered, why does it only vaporize the person? You never see it, continue into the floor or the wall or
Right.
the furniture
Wouldn't
they're
it
sitting in.
superheat the hell out of the air?
Yeah, they even mentioned once, I believe it was original Star Trek, the immunity syndrome.
Really?
Where they pointed out, okay, they put the ship into a globulous, area, and if we use the phasers, we're just gonna superheat the shit out of all the substance out there and boil ourselves alive.
Exactly.
So it's like, well then, how does that work with the air and it never makes sense to me.
Right.
It's space science bullshit.
Yes, exactly. But before the guy is killed, they question him a little bit about a random woman that he's looking to meet. And they're trying to find something. So, man, in classic film noir fashion, you're already introduced to the MacGuffin. There's a thing that they're looking for. The Maltese Falcon of this episode. It's the thing everyone, the great what's it. And then he gets offed, and then we're off to Quark's, where they're getting ready. Is this a scene where I think we're introduced to them trying to set up another Our Man Bashir type thing, another Secret Agent Bashir
For the weekend, they're gonna go into the holodeck and play around in not a James Bond story.
Yes, they're very careful about not being like James Bond this time. As we mentioned in Our Man Bashir, that was something that resulted in a lawsuit, or a threatened lawsuit. And so because they were threatened legal action from MGM, they decided to desist from any further explicit discussions of the James Bond franchise. You know why that's retarded, dude?
Please.
Have you ever been to Ohio?
Ohio, no.
Okay, in Ohio, there's a great theme park. And for the record, if you're a roller coaster junkie, it's one of the best theme parks you can go to. It's called Kings Island. Kings Island is owned and operated, or at least at the time when I went, it was owned and operated by CBS Paramount. So instead of, like if you go to Six Flags, it's all Warner Brothers stuff because they have a stake in Six Flags. Or you go to Universal, and obviously it's a bunch of Universal stuff, Jurassic Park rides, all that stuff. Kings Island has a bunch of Star Trek stuff and Top Gun stuff. And through some kind of deal, they were currently around this time, like late 90s. When I first went to Kings Island, it was 1997 or 8. So not far from when this episode aired. And one of the big things they had just advertised was, to coincide, I guess, with The World Is Not Enough, a great big James Bond 4D experience ride. I forget what it was called, like GoldenEye, something. It's like the GoldenEye The Ride or something. Dude, the line for that thing was around the block twice.
Oh, I bet.
It was huge. It was absolutely huge. Looking back on this, it's ridiculous. They threatened legal action against a company they were already partnered with for theme park attractions? What the MGM are that litigious? It makes you wonder if maybe it wasn't more so Eon Productions, the guys who own James Bond.
Maybe.
I don't know, but either way, I always found that interesting. So, this whole scene where they're sort of trying to sort out how this secret agent fantasy is going to go is much less explicit James Bond reference. In fact, it really doesn't go James Bond-y at all. It almost sounds like a war movie or something like that.
They don't even mention secret agents or anything. It's just like, oh yeah, you're gonna get the girl, and I'm gonna be the hero. Wink, wink.
And they're kind of Odo is supposed to be
a detective or something.
Some kind of detective or authority figure who's gonna steal the girl away.
So, is everybody all right for Saturday?
Fine.
No problem. Odo?
What do you want me to do again?
Save the queen.
Not only that, you get to drive around in fancy automobiles and go to posh parties and steal her away from Falcon.
He steals my girl? Maybe you'd better get another Nigel Dunlap.
Are you kidding? Look at her.
I'm busy on Saturday.
And he says no. And O'Brien takes one look at the chick and is like, I'll do it! And dude, I don't blame him. That girl was hotter than Thai food. Holy bucket, she was hot. Anyway, so they kind of settle that. Odo walks away. It's clear he's kind of having a moment. He's having a little changeling menstruation moment. It's his time of the month. And so he walks over to Quark's bar, where Quark is conversing with a mysterious lady at a bar. How many Noir have begun this way? This couldn't have been more explicit if the girl had walked into his office, right?
Yeah.
With with the Venetian blinds shadow coming into the room, and she was wearing a great big hat with a veil on it. You know what I mean? Couldn't be more explicit. And they get into a little bit of a tete-a-tete. I like the little line of dialogue where Quark is kind of trying to hit on her, and she's like, you should keep your eyes more so on your customers and your games. And he's like, what do you mean? I can walk and chew gum. He gives her the old Biden line. And much like our president, he can't. She points out helpfully that one of the guys has like a magnetron emitter or something that's interfering with the games of chance.
Yeah.
Which I like that. And Quark is like, kind of laughs it off for a second, and I love the way Armin Shimmerman plays it. Then he quickly realizes she's correct and then just slinks away quietly without saying anything. So Odo exchanges awkward banter with a woman who may as well have the words femme fatale flashing in a sign above her head. And what exactly are they going to talk about? He's trying to kind of get information out of her a little bit.
Yeah, he's like, are you waiting for someone? Or is anybody bothering you? Can I do something
Are you
for
tired? Because you've been walking through my mind all day.
And she compliments him on his bedroom eyes.
Yes. Good Yngwie Malmsteen song. And so he is very, very, like, verklempt as a result of that. He kind of backs away slowly. I love how he almost hits the wall. Backs into the Quark sign that's still up. The condemned by the Commerce Authority sign that is still up. And, he walks out, and then we kind of begin the episode proper, right? After the intro, we kind of get into... Now we've got to hook into the plot of, okay, what exactly is going on with her? And so, how exactly do we do that? She then, instead of walking into his office, she breaks into his office.
So she was looking at a passenger manifest. She would, try to hack into the computer, and she couldn't get in.
We should mention, she has Elon Musk Neuralink.
Yes, she has a data port beneath her ear.
Yeah.
Or just behind her ear, hooks directly into your brain, which that sounds wonderful, doesn't it?
I think that's a new thing. That has not been in Star Trek before now, I don't think.
Yeah, we go into it a little more later, but she's from a world where there is no Federation control.
Yeah.
So it's a humanoid world filled with, like, different kinds of aliens and whatever. It's like what America is today.
Yeah. That sounds like Nar Shaddaa or something from Star Wars.
Yeah.
A little bit. Her first date gift is a cyberjacking, but though probably not the kind that Odo wants. And cyberjacking, in fact, with a side of B&E. 2 sides of B&E, actually. She breaks into his office.
What's this all about? You tried to break into the station computer. Why?
My friend never showed up last night. I wanted to check the passenger manifest to find out if he came aboard.
Why didn't you come to me? I could have checked the manifests for you.
When you grow up in Vanea Prime, you learn not to trust policemen.
Data port bothering you?
The security protocols protecting your computer generated some nasty feedback.
I know. I designed them that way.
Nice job. I couldn't stay interfaced long enough to break past the encryption lockouts.
That was the idea. Tell me, Arissa, what's a nice woman like you doing with the data port?
They're not illegal.
They ought to be. People tend to use them to access information other people don't want them to access.
I've heard that.
He is remarkably lenient with her. He accepts her story, but I love how Rene Auberjonois plays it. Because you could tell if you're just watching his face. He knows she's lying. He knows. Just look at how, when she says something, instead of, oh, I accept that, you get almost a hint of a look of disappointment on his face when he's... Brilliant performance from Renee Aubergenois. So you're just watching this, and instantly, as soon as I'm watching it, not from her behavior, but from Odo's reaction, I'm just like, oh, she's lying. Okay, got it. And then, of course, sure. So what is her story, by the way? She's claiming that she's looking for her daughter?
Yes, a man she was supposed to meet was going to give her information on the whereabouts of her daughter.
Yeah, the moment she mentions daughter, from the look on Odo's face, it's like, oh, she doesn't have a daughter. He knows. He knows. And this is a through line through the whole episode. This is why it's so well written, directed, performed, is Odo knows she's full of crap from the beginning, which is a classic noir trope, right? You go back through even, I mentioned the Maltese Falcon earlier with, Humphrey Bogart and the femme fatale in that film. And there's, famous lines of dialogue where it's like, what do you think you can buy me off with just that? And she replies, what can I buy you off with? Like things like that, right? Those kind of lines, that very much is sort of the push-pull of this entire episode between the two of them. So she breaks and enters one time. Odo doesn't buy it, but he pretends he does. And she goes away, and instantly she's not done trying to break and enter, do whatever nefarious nonsense she's trying to do. So she goes off to, what is it, the Port Authority, or the, what is it?
Not quite yet. They decide to go take a look for this guy that she's here to meet.
Yeah.
And he's not in his quarters. Or is he?
Yes. They find the powder burns, and Odo instantly knows, oh, a guy was killed here. God, it might as well be a bloodstain, right? And at first I was like, how does he? And then Taryn helpfully reminded me of what?
He worked for the Kardashians.
I was going to say, I'm like, he probably found a powder burn on a carpet a minute. Because he worked for the bloody Cardis. Very, very good point there.
It's security. Hello?
He's not here.
Oh, yes, he is. What's left of him?
So after that, they know that he was wasted, but again, her story's not quite checking out. He leaves her alone, and of course, the moment he leaves her alone, another breaking and entering incident. She goes to, again, I'm not sure what it is.
It's the assay office.
Assay office. Thank you very much. The assay, which we have seen before, by the way.
Right.
On the show. It's the room with all the drawers.
Yeah, it's the repurposed morgue.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's the morgue, sometimes it's whatever, the lost and found. It's whatever. It's the multi-purpose room. And so she's in there and she's using her Neuralink to break into something, to jack into something, and to get something. And then as she's walking away, who should saunter up but Odo? Because we know from his last two interactions with her, he knows, he has a feeling that her motivations are more pure than they seem, but he doesn't believe her still. Like, there's still a skepticism there. And I really, really dig that. So anyway, he shows up, and what happens then, Taryn?
Well, they have a little back and forth. He says, I've been following you.
Yeah, no kidding.
She's just basically trying her best, but she knows she's caught.
Right.
She hands over a data chip she found in the guy's drawer. I guess the assay office is kind of like a locker or something or other.
Yeah,
you just
storage.
Rent out storage, right. And she finds a data chip, a
Yeah.
heavily encrypted data chip.
Again, this is the MacGuffin, the classic MacGuffin from film noir.
And Odo decides, well, okay, I'll help you, decode this. I'll give it to Dax or whatever.
Is this when she kind of comes clean on her BS story?
Oh, yeah, Odo calls her out.
Yes, and now he recognizes she's in trouble and she has to be placed into protective custody. And by protective custody, I mean Odo's bed. Very quickly. They take her off to what are supposed to be her protective quarters, and then immediately they transport out to Odo's quarters.
Nice room.
Don't get too used to it. You're not staying here. Odo to security. Begin transport. There. Now, if anyone was watching, they'll think you're still in the other quarters.
Good trick. Hope it works. Interesting furniture.
I use these things to practice shape-shifting.
These are your quarters?
I thought this would be the last place anyone would look for you. There's a bed in the other room. I was planning to stay out here so I could keep an eye on you.
Which have been rearranged a little bit. He's still got the little Jungle Gym playset there.
But now he has like a whole computer console there that I didn't notice before.
He has a whole computer console, and he's got a bunch of like weird kind of expressionist sculptures and stuff like that right around his quarters. He's got slightly more human surroundings. This is something we should mention. I like this episode, but one thing that I wish is he should have still been human. I pointed this out in a previous review that we did. That, like, he winds up having a little bit of a romance with another girl later on, but the damnable part of it is, by then, he's a changeling again. So it's like, this has a little bit less impact. It does foreshadow a little bit his stuff with Kira, and the curious thing about this episode is apparently the intent here with the writing was to kind of get Odo and Kira apart. Because they had a little bit of a Odo is heartsick about Kira subplot that's been in the show for, over a season.
Right.
And they kind of, they felt like it had been played out after the episode Crossfire. And so the idea here is, okay, well, we'll kind of put a period at the end of that sentence. He'll move on with another girl, and that'll be that. It didn't work out that way. And you know what I think did it? Like, in some of the descriptions of the episode, I hear, like, oh, the writers just changed their minds. But I watched this episode, and I can clearly see why they changed their mind. Because there's a scene here that we didn't mention. It was just like 1 or 2 scenes ago, where Odo and Kira are in one of the docking bays. And he's talking about, I don't know, he's looking at his reflection. I don't know, what the hell are bedroom eyes, right? And he explains this girl told him he has bedroom eyes, and Kira kind of walks away and says, well, who is this woman? And he's like, why? And she says, because she's perceptive, right? So now you get a little bit on her end of flirtation, a slight amount. And I bet you anything that's what hooked the writers. Like, oh, okay, never mind. We're not going to completely drop this.
Yeah.
This is not something we're totally going to give up on. That's just my feel. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
No, writing from her perspective, it's kind of obvious that they're kind of forced to have to write that she's still interested. Because, oh, another woman. That's swell.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not interested in you.
No, not at all.
I'm with, what's his name? Yeah, lots of stuff going on there. All right, you have a good one.
So he kind of winds up being the police detective in the film Noir, who's protecting this woman, and it's a little bit of a bodyguard situation. It's based, apparently, they based it off of a famous B-film noir from the early 50s called The Narrow Margin. And it's a movie that a lot of people have taken bits and bobs from. The movie Bodyguard, which I just mentioned, they remade it along with a lot of... Man, the 1980s were just the decade when everyone was remaking classic film noir with new actors, right? So there was a version with Gene Hackman and Ann Archer in the 80s, and so... Yes, I do see The Narrow Margin, don't get me wrong, and of course the whole conceit there is the police detective is protecting this woman. It seems like she might be a criminal, might be involved in something, and then it turns out at the end that she's actually an undercover police officer the whole time. That's kind of the big conceit of The Narrow Margin. For me, from the MacGuffin to the femme fatale to the prolonged stay in Odo's quarters, and kind of the string of pearls that is the little chip that she's after, this feels to me like a full-flight ripoff of Raymond Chandler's Red Wind, which is one of his most famous stories. I don't know, very quickly you wind up with her whole story kind of breaking down. And by the time she's staying in Odo's quarters, and they have some great scenes together where she's talking about her history, you know, she has no daughter, she has no friend. Hell, I'm half convinced at this point she hasn't even got a gash. Like, all of her stories are lies from beginning to end. And the thing that I love about this scene in the quarters with her and Odo, where she's showing him the data port and all of that, and surprise, surprise, like all women with daddy issues, Arissa has an OnlyFans. She was a net girl.
I mean...
brain sex. If you ever played Cyberpunk 2077, my apologies. But they stole that idea and put that in there. The net girl, so girls who are basically mind prostitutes. That whole thing. But in this scene is one of my favorite, maybe my favorite line in the entire episode. Where Odo's got a pad next to his computer. And she's like, what is that? And what else could it be, right? Oh, it's a detective novel, of course. And she's like, well, did you figure out who did it yet? And he gets this crestfallen kind of, he's tempted, he knows she's full of crap look, and he's kind of disappointed, but he's kind of enthralled look on his face. Just brilliant performance by Renee Auberjonois, and he says, I figured it out by the 3rd page. The best line in the whole episode. Because he's telling her, without telling her, I know you're full of crap. Like, I know all this. There is something more going on here. I shouldn't be doing anything that I'm doing. So, of course, they fuck.
Yeah.
I don't know. How'd you feel about this whole sequence?
I mean, the first part where she's explaining how she met the bad guy in question.
Yeah, she worked for the Orion Syndicate, because everything on DS9 that involves crime has to do with the Orion Syndicate.
And while taking on customers, she ran into one that paid her a lot of money.
Yep.
And eventually started paying her for, you know, breaking into systems, getting information on people.
Yep.
And she came here on a whim because a guy said, hey, I'll help you out of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, she just felt compelled to believe him.
Yep.
And
we learn why that is later.
And she hopped on the next shuttle to Deep Space Nine.
And that's it. That's why she's here.
That is why she's here.
And the whole scene is like lit and staged very much noir. You know, we're over Odo's shoulder watching her talk about this stuff. It's very much framed like a noir. But this does draw my eye to something that did bother me in this episode a little bit. She's got, what's the girl's name, by the way, Ray?
Dae Young.
Dae Young. The actress is Dae Young. She's very much like, they've done her makeup and hair in such a way. She's kind of femme fatale-ish, and yet for a film noir femme fatale, her outfit just never, it's about as piquant as a nun's habit. Like, it's just a big frumpy dress. And you kind of like, what's wrong with the wardrobe here? Turns out, this is the same exact dress that she wore in TNG when she was a guest star on that, and it's the same basic outfit that she wore when she guest starred on Enterprise. Later on, they just kept reusing the outfit because it had already been tailored for her, and it's just like, what the hell? Why didn't you do wardrobe for this poor girl? Like,
especially for such a specific role. Like, you're supposed to be like this seductress, this mysterious woman, and you just put her in like an office dress?
Yeah, it's almost like I mean, it's still a dress, but it almost has a pantsuit kind of vibe to it. Like, you're right, it looks like work clothes or something. It does not look as seductive as the character is supposed to be. And that's just my gripe. Just a level of surprising laziness for DS9, because they're normally on top of this kind of stuff, right? But anyway, so they snog, and then they changeling snog. He kind of explains, like, she's like, you're a virgin? Like, seriously? He's like, yeah, I guess with humanoids, but, you know, me and a pile of goo back on my home planet, right? We had a few too many Mai Tais, one thing led to another, and
we had Goo-Sex.
Yeah, we exchanged fluid. This was no big deal. You ever eat fondue? Anyway, so he kind of explains that, and then he demonstrates to her, and this is definitely foreshadowing of later on. We won't spoil anything, but so yeah, anyways, from that point, though, we get the final wrinkle in the story. Odo is in his office, and someone else walks on in. Now, mind you, we're also interspersing between this. We still have the two assassins that wasted the guy at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, they've been hiding out on the station the entire time.
In what looks like the cargo bay.
Right.
And they're just kind of plotting. Like, okay, we gotta go after her. At first, they think they could just lean on her and get what they need, and finally they realize, we can't lean on her because she's near the security chief. Now we're gonna have to kill her. Now we have to kill her. So they're plotting to kill her all the while. And as this is going on, all of a sudden Odo's in his office, and, well, he goes in his office later, but because, you know, we have the gossiping scene where everyone on DS9 is talking about the fact that Odo finally got his end wet. And but after that, he's in his office, and one of the same hooded aliens as the guy from the beginning of the episode saunters on through the door.
Can I help you?
Your security chief, Odo.
Yes.
I'm here about the communication you sent to the Idanian government.
Go on.
Where's Arissa? Is she safe?
You know her?
Better than she knows herself.
What does that mean?
She's not who she seems to be. She's an intelligence agent with my government. She was sent to infiltrate Drame's organization.
That's not possible. She would have told me.
She doesn't know.
So this guy apparently is with Idanian security.
Yes.
During the whole beginning of this, Odo sent word to their homeworld. It's like, hey, do you know this guy? He's kind of dead.
Yes.
Let us know if you know anything. And apparently they're a very secretive race.
Yeah.
So he wasn't really expecting a response.
Yep.
But hey, in walks this dude, and he spills the whole beans about what's going on.
Yes, he does, and it's some pretty serious beans, folks. It's like 5-bean chili. Turns out our femme fatale is a fed fatale. She is working undercover, and what is she working undercover for?
Basically, like Secret Service security. She's insider to find out who this, what was his name again? Dram or something? This big criminal organization, and she's gonna spill the beans on him. But here's the thing. She doesn't know it.
She doesn't know it. I found this interesting. We're reusing a conceit that we already used in, what's the episode name? Second Skin. Kira, when she went undercover with the Cardassians, with the idea that they put an agent embedded in sort of wet ops, essentially, and they wipe their memory or they give them a new identity. In this case, they do both on this girl. They wipe her memory and they give her new memories. And apparently all of her old memories, identity, and everything else are stored on that chip.
So, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
They even mentioned that when they gave it to Dax, Odo mentions that they plugged it into to the computer and it immediately fed back onto the system and nearly crashed it. If they had just plugged that into her in the first place, it might have just given her memories back.
Exactly.
Because it was meant for her.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Turns out she's undercover to bring down the Space Sinaloa cartel, basically. And right away, we get that whole thing. They wind up... Shoot, what happens next, actually? Go ahead and...
Immediately as this is happening in Odo's office, she gets the idea. It's like, okay, I'm going to save my own skin.
Yep.
I'm going to get the chip back, and I'm going to trade it for my life. I'm just going to give it to those guys and be done with it.
Yep.
And they decide, well, we're just going to take the chip and kill her anyway.
Yep. Because, of course, the chip has value for them because it's got all of the information, everything that can bring them down. So anyway, and what happens from there? Of course,
They meet in the cargo hold or bay or whatever. She hands over the chip. They do a little tete-a-tete. I'm not carrying any weapons. You're not carrying any weapons. Yep. Okay, are we good? Awesome. See ya.
Yep.
And he says, "Not so fast. Here's my friend with his gun."
His gun that he doesn't know how to change between stun and kill. We've already established in the first scene.
Yet he obsessively polishes it.
Obsessively polishes it, but can't figure out the settings on the top of the gun quite. And then, of course, we ride to the rescue and whatnot, and she gets saved. The whole standard thing, but that's not really the main event here, of course.
Maybe you should close your eyes.
You were supposed to secure the door.
I did! Don't move!
They then have to plug her in and give her memories back. And you just sense from this point on, okay, so she's gonna have a husband, she's gonna have like 90 kids, right?
You don't, it's so much more deeper than that, though.
Yeah.
It's not just that she's getting a new set of memories back. She was also cosmetically changed.
Yep. She's, what are they, Idanians, whatever the...
Idanian or something,
yeah.
yeah.
She was an Idanian, so she's not even the same species that she thinks. And so you get this heartbreaking scene where, you know, she finally goes into Odo's quarters and has to explain, hey, look, I've got a husband. Now, you wonder why they would let her have the memories. Couldn't they just wipe the horrible memories of doing this undercover wet work from her brain? But apparently she gets to keep those just so she can be tortured the rest of her life about the mistakes she made while she was brainwashed.
And you know, the people she accidentally got killed.
Right, that too. And she explains she has a husband and Odo's... I mean, what do you do if you're Odo? You can't be mad at her. She didn't know, right? She didn't know. But of course, the moral of the story, never fall in love with an e-girl. He kind of lets her go, and then we get him turning toward the window in classic film noir detective fashion, in sort of depressed existentialism writ large. And then the episode is over. It's a really good episode. It plays to all of DS9's strengths. It plays to the continuity because we have a character here in Odo who's been developing more human instincts as time goes on. We remember at the beginning of this series, Odo wanted nothing to do with humanity at all.
Yeah. And
so he's developing as a character. We get a bit of noir. That's always a lovely element to throw into DS9. It's something we've played with a number of times in the episodes, particularly that flash back to when the station was under Cardassian occupation, and Odo was, of course, the constable even then. All of that stuff. So we've repeatedly gone back to the film noir well. So it's playing to that. It's got this kind of... I always love the DS9 episodes that end on an unsettling note. I mean, there's no resolution here. Not really. There's only the crushing realization that nothing is ever gonna quite be the same. And indeed, for Odo, it's not. It really isn't. The one gripe that I have about it, and I would even knock off a star for it, this would be probably a 5-star, because it's really good. But I would knock off a star for the fact that he's not human when this episode airs. I think that was a mistake.
They definitely should have aired this a lot sooner when he was still human.
Yeah, apparently what happened was they were trying to get a couple of actors and actresses to be in this. They wanted to get the specific actress that wound up playing Orisa. And they did get her. But I guess she wasn't available until later. And they were working, actually, this was going to be an even more important episode going forward, because they had actually come up with the idea of Vic Fontaine. the character who becomes Vic Fontaine, the nightclub crooner who's going to be on the holodeck, or in the holosuite rather, and is going to be a very important character once he is introduced. They wrote him into the script, and they wound up having to cut him out because they couldn't get the exact Vegas-style crooner that they wanted to get. He wasn't available. They tried to go to the wall for him, delay the episode production for a while, just didn't happen. And incidentally, they wound up going with Bobby Darin's son. So ultimately, they wound up having to settle for a different actor. But that's really, I believe, why this episode wound up being pushed back. I give this 3.5, 4 out of 5. I'll go 4. I'll just knock the 1 star off for it not taking place when Odo was a human, and for her wardrobe. I think she should have looked more femme fatale. They should have gone more in that direction with her.
I'll definitely give it a 4. I think that's fair. We're introduced with a good noir story, a good detective story.
Yeah.
We're given information on. I always love hearing more about what exists outside of the Federation. Because we never really explore that too much. And hearing her describe where she's been this whole time, that it's not always so clean, and there's, actual crime shit happening.
Yeah, it sounds like Coruscant or something. Like, it sounds like a seedy little, what is it, the Faineans home world or whatever?
Yeah.
It sounds seedy, and it sounds like a land of intrigue. It's the kind of cool, interesting stuff. You see more of that stuff in other TV shows, but it's nice when it creeps into Star Trek, because you get kind of a Farscape moment, a Star Hunter moment that feels a little more grounded. DS9 is probably the Star Trek series where you see the most of that, outside of Enterprise. Enterprise has a few episodes that are like that. But folks, I like this one. A simple investigation. This is one of my favorite ones of this season so far, I gotta say. It's really, really good. I did have to take off that mark just for the one thing, because I think that's not an insignificant misstep. But folks, as this season gets rolling, it is only going to get better from here. Until next time, I am Captain Fist for Lieutenant Commander Gell. Engage, sweetheart.
Car trouble, Mr. Bashir. Hi, Odo.
I should go. Thank you, Doctor.
Odo. This isn't fair. Odo and I were talking.
Didn't anyone ever tell you you shouldn't stop for hitchhikers?